I'm going to try and explain this just kind of quickly because I know that uh, I know that not everybody has a long attention span. Here's the thing. So my capitalism is perfect because of the incentive structure that holds the system up. And this is just kind of my off the cuff explanation. I just got done walking around my neighborhood, so I wasn't really none of this is planned out or scripted. But there's a couple things about capitalism that makes it perfect. Okay, and I'm gonna go into those things to the best of my ability. The incentive structure and the I would say the incentive structure and the membership criteria and the supply and demand aspects of capitalism are non-complicated. They're very simple. So you have the supply and demand, and you have membership criteria, and then you also have the incentive structure, and that pretty much makes up all of capitalism. It's very simple. So the incentive structure is that wealth will be made, the promise of wealth will be made if a person or company or institution succeeds at solving a problem, making something better, innovating, so on and so forth, okay? It also, the incentive structure also punishes you if you fail at your objective. If you are not as good as you think you are, if you screw things up, the system, you will know it because you will fail. Or maybe if you're not as good as your competition, they will beat you in your objective. They will win in their objective. They will make more money, get more market share. You get what I'm saying, okay? That's the incentive structure, okay? The other two parts of capitalism are what we just said a second ago: membership criteria and the kind of supply demand. This is the most gray area portion of this, is that supply demand, price, supply demand. It's not really a structure, it's more of an equilibrium, okay? Because there's labor involved with that. But before we go into the gray area, we can go into the membership criteria area. So you have incentive structure of capitalism, perfect. Absolutely, it's perfection. The incentive structure is perfection. That's what holds this. That's what keeps the system going, and that's what allows the system to continue to get better. Okay, that's why all the technology, all the best technology, literally all of the best technology on Earth, all of the best innovation and invention on Earth comes from capitalist structure, because you have to allow for complete freedom and complete open-mindedness, and there can't be any punishment. It has to be incentive based. You cannot punish someone into creating something. There must be a $1 billion paycheck. If you want to cure HIV, you cannot whip someone into doing that. The person must have to know that they stand to gain billions of dollars cash in order for that HIV to be solved, okay? Or the iPhone to be created, or Microsoft to be created, or Google to be, so on and so forth, okay? If you want to retire on the beach, same thing. You can niche down all the way to the person. You can go to the institution all the way down to the person, everything in between, okay? Nobody's going to come home late to their wife or miss their son's baseball game for free, okay? They're going to do that because they know they want to have a second child or a third child, or they want to retire on the beach someday. They're going to do that for a reason. Now that's eroding, and we can get into that at the end, because that people are not really doing that anymore because they're doing it out of necessity now. So it's becoming, the system is now broken. They're doing it out of necessity. It's becoming rapidly really bad. That's a different. We'll get into that. We'll put that to the side. Okay. You have the incentive structure, which keeps things going, which is perfect, really, because you what you do is what capitalism does inherently is it incentivizes the outcome. So you don't have to order people around. If you're, let's say you're at the top, or you're Congress, you're the government, you're the president, or you're the leader of X, Y, or Z. You don't have to order people around to do this, do that, do this. People will naturally say, "Hey, I know I'm a good mechanic. I'm gonna open up shop. I can crush it in my zip code." You don't have to make them do it. They'll do it because there's a carrot at there's a prize at the end of. So they'll do it, and the people in that community, in that zip code, they benefit from having a cheaper place to take their Lexus that does the job twice as good. Okay, that happens all the time, and that's why maybe Lexus has to lower their prices because they're losing market share. And maybe Lexus has to do better because so it creates it creates things that there's the system is perfect because things get better and better and better and better, so long as nobody cheats. And if that guy who gives if the small guy goes in competition with Lexus and you know does a really good job, he's going to get paid accordingly. Or if he bites off more than he can chew, he's going to get punished accordingly, and he'll go out of business. That's one part of the pie. The second part of the pie is the membership criteria, and then the third part of the pie is, well, not the final, but the other third part of the pie is the supply and demand and pricing and labor. Supply, demand, pricing, labor equilibrium. It's not really like the incentives. The incentive based structure is more of a structure. The incentive based part of the pie is more of a structure instead of like an equilibrium. But although it does act in it is a flowing thing. Membership criteria, okay? So there's a box that you have to look at capitalism like it's a box. You have to say, you have to define the people who are operating inside the confines of a capitalist, let's say, country or state, or the people who are participating in capitalism. They must be defined, okay? So who participates, right? You can't have somebody or a company or a country or an ally or an adversary or a foreigner or an 11-year-old. You cannot have an 11-year-old participating in capitalism along with the rest of the adults. It's not legal. They're not a legal participant. You cannot have somebody who doesn't have proper an illegal immigrant, let's say, undocumented, whatever you want to call them, I don't care. You can't have them participating in this box because they don't fit the membership criteria. The illegal immigrant and the 11-year-old equally do not economically, like in a literal sense, they equally do not belong inside the box. Okay? And this is economics. This is not personal. I don't care if you can't make it through that sentence, you got bigger problems than the economy. But the illegal immigrant and nobody would allow an 11-year-old to be a mechanic because he doesn't fit the membership criteria. It's membership criteria. You must be a member. Okay? And these are like unspoken, they're not really talked about often, but this is the easiest, most simplest part. This is the easiest, simplest piece of the pie. Okay? Because you know why? You know why? The membership criteria portion of the pie is legally defined. There are legal definitions. So it's easy. You know if a 16-year-old is allowed to drive, or if an 18-year-old is allowed to buy a pack of smokes. Because if you're 17 years old and 17 years old and 364 days, you're still not 18. It doesn't matter. So if you're 21, if you're 20 years old and 364 days, you still can't buy liquor because you don't fit the membership criteria in which you would need to do that. Okay, so it's the membership criteria for to participate in the American capitalist system, capitalism, is very clearly, very clearly defined. It's actually codified into law. That's what makes it extremely simple. You can look it up and say, oh, this person doesn't belong. This is not allowed. It's very easy. You can point to it on paper and say, this is the law. That's why you have things like e-verify and all this other type of stuff. It's not legal for a non-member to participate in the system. Okay? And this is a huge issue. People don't want to talk about it. I hear a lot of bigoted, racist people who are saying that illegal immigrants are here to do farm work and all that. That's so crazy racist and bigoted that they're only here to do farm. The fact that they would have such a narrow view of a human being that they're only here to hustle and do farm work is absolutely insane to me. But even that, like, is so far from the truth. That's not 1997 anymore. That's so far from the truth. And then, furthermore, it touches every aspect of society. It breaks the system. So even if it was true, it would still break the system. But it's not true because the fracturing trickles up to the top. Okay, look it up right now. Only what 18%, 15% of American high schoolers are working. Where'd the jobs go? Somebody's still working the jobs. I'll tell you who's working the job. The people who are working the jobs don't fit the membership criteria. That's why high schoolers didn't wake up and say, you know what? They didn't just suddenly wake up one day and say, oh, we don't want to work. Okay, so this breaks the system, okay? Same thing for the membership criteria portion of this that you need to fit in the box must be upheld. They must the rules must be enforced, to put it very simply. They must enforce e-verify and all that. They must enforce illegal. Let's just be honest. Illegal immigration must be enforced. It must be enforced because it fractures everything. Okay, that's a different story. I'm just explaining capitalism because every part of the pie, someone's cheating, and the system's breaking because of it. And the people at the top, or the people who have their own big social media, they know what's going on, and they're distracting from the problem. The part of the pie with the incentive structure is being broken. The part of the pie with the membership criteria definitions is being broken. And then on the third part of the pie is the supply and demand equilibrium, and supply and demand and labor and price equilibrium. Okay, so and this, they all tie into each other. Okay, so when you have, there's something called price discovery. Okay, and if you have an item or a service that you want to sell and it's too expensive in a capitalist economy, you will know it. You'll get feedback from your consumer because they're either going to buy more of it or they're not going to buy enough of it. And you can adjust your prices accordingly or go out of business or innovate or find a way to make your process cheaper. It's up to you how to figure that out. Okay, that's capitalism. It's up to you. The system figures itself out, or the person goes out of business. Okay, but here's the sinister part. Here's the tricky part. Price discovery doesn't just apply to, and here's how everybody's lying. A lot of people are just straight up lying. And I know this because I don't see anybody talking about this. Price discovery is not just limited to, and I'm a regular bro. I'm just a regular dude, but I'm not a fucking idiot either. So price discovery is not limited to products and services. People need to learn this. Price discovery is not limited to goods and services. Price discovery also prices labor. This is the part that everybody knows at the top and none of them talk about. This is the part that your favorite financial YouTuber deeply understands and never speaks about. And this is how I know it's sinister and dark, because these people know if I'm a regular bro and I know that this is plain as day, I have no script. I'm going off the top of my head, and this is instantly known. Okay? Price discovery is not limited to goods and services. It's also limited to human labor. You know the racist people that say, "Oh, immigrants are illegal immigrants. Then who's gonna go to the farm? Who's gonna be your maid and work the farm fields?" And that, you know, the racists, how they're saying that. Maybe they're just ignorant. I'll go to a farm and do farm work for the right price. That's how you get price discovery. But the person who's cheating the system says, "Oh no, I can cheat the system and get it done for $10 an hour. I can break the rules and get it done cheap." But you know what happens with that when stuff like that? Let's say that wasn't even breaking the rules. Well, does the product get cheaper if the farmer or the mechanic or let's just say Ford or Amazon? Let's just say Amazon. Well, what's an easy product where there's a lot of cheating? What's an easy service? Because it's not just farmers. What is an easy service where there's lots of illegal immigration? Restaurant. Okay? Your favorite restaurant, insert. Let's say it's a $50 per plate restaurant. So 2 people, $100, right? If the owner of the restaurant, let's say, can cheat and he can hire somebody under the table for $10 instead of having to pay an American high schooler $20, does your plate, does your dinner tab go down in price? No, it doesn't. But the money still, that the padding is still realized, so the owner still saves on money. Where's the money go? It's still realized because the owner saves. And this happened. We're just talking about the very owner operator, sole proprietor. This goes all the way to top. See, this goes up to Amazon, all the way to Walmart, all the way to large companies, medium companies, small companies. It's not just the farm workers anymore. It's not 1996 anymore. The bigot and the racist still believe it's 1996. It's across the board now. We're talking about 50, 60 million immigrants come to the country in the last, I don't know, 45 years or something. 20. It's up for debate, but an additional 15 to 20 of which that just got here in the last 4 years. And people are thinking that what did they all just go to the fields? Like, really? No, not at all. It's across the board now, guys. And this is not a personal opinion. This is economics. And this is one part of the pie. So you have the incentive structure, which is breaking. In the incentive structure, you have also the reward and the punishment. That's the incentive structure. On the second part of the pie is the membership criteria. Okay, the illegal immigrant and the 11-year-olds don't belong because they're not legally allowed to participate in the economy. Okay, so price discovery, not just for the goods and services, but for labor. So when the worker, and this is the biggest part of the pie, this is the biggest part of why the system is breaking. This is the biggest part. This is 90% of the problem and why you're poor. And I hope you realize this. How much time has it been? Is this 20 minutes? Okay, I hope you realize this. When the worker, me, you, your parents, your cousins, it's not 1999 anymore. You cannot, and listen clearly, you and everybody you know in America right now, you cannot withhold your labor for higher wages because the price discovery mechanism is broken on your labor. If you go to your boss tomorrow, I'll bet you, and you say, hey, listen, I want a 12% raise because 12% is the hurdle rate. If you're not making 12% more next year, you're falling behind. You go to him today and say, I want a 13% raise. He's going to say, kick rocks, get out of here. Because he doesn't have to pay you. The fear of losing you, the employee, doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist. This is why everybody, and I'm saying, dude, everybody's, dude, everybody's going to be so broke. Everybody's going to be so broke going forward. And it's very sad, too, because capitalism is designed to fix all these things, inherently fixes them. There's an equilibrium for the price discovery of human labor, okay? So in a fair system, when the membership criteria structure is enforced, the worker can go to his boss and say, I want more money. And the boss can scratch his chin and say, no. And then the guy can say, the worker can say, okay, I'll go somewhere else. But when the membership criteria portion is enforced, there's not an unlimited pool of synthetic amounts of labor that push downward pressure on wages. Because if there wasn't synthetic downward pressure on the worker's ability to earn a living, then you could go to Target today and say, you know what, like, I want $31 an hour. And they'd say, how does 29 sound? That would really happen, like within a month across the entire country. That's contingent on the membership criteria portion of there. You have to look at this in three pieces: the incentive structure, the dynamics of the incentive structure, the upside and the downside, the reward and the punishment. Then in the middle, you have the membership criteria: who does and doesn't belong, and how to enforce it. Who fits in this box? Who can play on the team? You know, who can play this game, so to speak? Because not everybody, you can't have everybody playing it. It's not possible. The system would break. But if this, and then on the third part of the pie is the equilibrium of supply and demand, and how do you determine what something is worth in a capitalist society? What you can charge for it, right? So the guy who cures HIV, what can he charge? What could you charge to cure HIV? Think about it. Probably a couple $100 billion. If you could cure HIV today, like that, you could. If it's a name your price type of invention, that's how big it would be. It'd be kind of like name your price. Okay? You'd be instantly be worth many, 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 many billions of dollars, countless billions of dollars instantly. You'd be worth that. Okay. So going back, and this is all money based, which is fine. That's the best incentive ever: is money, retiring early, giving your family a good life, etc. Nothing wrong with that. But the third part of the pie is uh, supply and demand dynamics, pretty much. But inside the supply and demand dynamics, you have a price discovery dynamics. So it's not just supply. I should probably make this on a whiteboard, but this is a great explanation. And this is all going off the top of my head. Three parts of the pie: supply and demand, and inside the supply and demand dynamics, you have price discovery. Okay, and the part that nobody talks about is price discovery of actual human labor. That is 90% of the country's problem right now, is that you cannot withhold your labor for higher wages. And all of this, you can look at it in your mind like a flow chart. If this, then what? If this, then what? Is this true and why? Is this you can go through a flow chart. It's kind of like a web where it's like who, what, when, where, why, how, and you can go is this true, and then branch out from there and say who, what, when, where, why, how. Okay, for each portion, because let's say you take this part of the pie, so the supply dynamics, supply and demand. You say supply and demand, and then you branch out from there. There's a couple things that branch out from there. You say price discovery. So you have supply and demand, and then you have supply and demand of what? Goods, services, labor. Labor is the part nobody talks about. Goods, services, and labor. Okay? And then you say, well, what's something worth? What is X worth? What is this worth? What is Y worth? What is one worth? What is two, three, four, XYZ? What are these things worth? What is the price of these things? And the market will tell you. The market tells you. You don't have to. You can set your price if you want. You can go to your boss tomorrow and say, I want $150,000, and he can say nope. And you can say, listen, I want a 10% raise. He can say, okay, because the market tells you. As long as the membership criteria part is being maintained. Okay? So it's like a flow chart. On this part of the pie, you have supply and demand, then you have labor and price discovery. And then it's an equilibrium. Okay? So goods and services, when things go on sale, when the turkey goes on sale at your grocery store, is because of supply and demand. Okay? And you see it in the price discovery. If nobody's buying that turkey, it's too expensive. And that you can discover, oh yeah, this is gonna fly off the shelf at $3.44. $4.60 is too expensive. Okay? Membership criteria is the simplest, most straightforward part of the pie. Because it's already codified, it's already decided, it's already law. It's already decided. You just have to enforce it. So you have two parts of the pie, which you have the enforcement of the 1/3 of the pie, and then you have the other two parts of the pie. One of them is dynamic. The other one is kind of like the other one is in equilibrium that inherently solves itself, so long as the membership criteria portion is being maintained. Meaning, within a month, you will know that you can walk into Target. Let's say membership criteria. Let's say, just hypothetically, instantly, all illegal immigrants were there was that. Let's just say Target. Let's just say the government was going to come in and this is just hypothetical company. I'm not saying it's Target doing anything wrong, but let's just say Target because I love Target. Let's just say hypothetically the government said, listen, if we catch you hiring illegal immigrants, or if we catch you doing this, we're gonna find you. We're gonna find you $100,000 and a day if we catch you doing this. Instantly. Target would have mass layout. It's not necessarily Target. It's any company. So instantly, let's just say hypothetically, you can call it Target. I don't want to pick on Target because I love Target, but let's just say a company has 20%, or a company, one company, B company has 20% or 15% of their employees, but not legally allowed to work there. 10% of their employees, right? If they instantly laid off 10% of their employees, and you were legally allowed to work there, you could go to them the next day and say, I want a raise. And they would say, here you go. Because the price of their goods and services doesn't go down because they can hire cheap labor. It stays the same. It's gluttony. It's greed. That's the part. Here's the part where people, they march on Wall Street and they say, oh, Wall Street bad, Wall Street bad. But here's what I'm explaining is what they can't define. I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm saying they're too emotional to define where the gangrene is, where the problem actually is. Because this company doesn't put things on sale because they're hiring cheap because their labor expenditure price, because a company's labor expenditures or their labor margin, if say a company's operating at 35% labor, or 35% of the cost is going to labor, if they can suddenly find a way to plummet that down to 28% by hiring illegal immigrants, they don't put their goods and services on sale out of the kindness of their heart. They don't say, you know what, we've hired some illegal immigrants, we're going to run a sale. They don't. They keep the price of everything the same. They keep everything the same. But the gain is still the gain is absorbed inside the company, because the money is saved when the illegal immigrant gets paid. That money is saved. What they do with it is different, is inconsequential, but that's a realized gain. That's an actual realized gain, because they're cheating. They're cheating because if they had to hire a high schooler, they couldn't operate at 28% labor. They'd have to operate at 35% labor, or they'd have to innovate, or they'd have to come up with a better creation. They'd have to create a better product, or they'd have to be more efficient. Or maybe, because it's capitalism, maybe if they couldn't do that thing, maybe if they couldn't be efficient, or they couldn't innovate, or they couldn't do better, maybe the guy down the block would do better. That's capitalism right there. Because if the guy down the block can innovate or be creative or come up with a technology or do better, then the system moves forward. Or maybe a company that thinks this is better than it actually is, kind of dies off a little bit, and a new company on the block. And then the end consumer, the end user, gets a better, more advanced, more efficient, better product or service or whatever. Okay? That's how the system works. That's why America's so advanced. The system is perfect, okay? But there's more to this, because people are cheating. They're cheating on the labor dynamics. They're cheating on price discovery when it comes to labor, especially labor. Price discovery in labor is broken. And that is 90% of all of the problem. The other 8%, 90% of the problem is that you can't withhold your labor for higher wages. There's an instantaneous way to solve that, though. Instantaneously. You have to enforce the membership criteria part of the pie. I know a lot of people don't like it, or they have family that are illegal immigrants or whatever. That doesn't matter. What I'm saying is still factual. Whether they have I'm sympathetic to the people who have family members that are illegal. I'm sympathetic to that, but it doesn't mean that the system. It doesn't mean I'm saying anything that's not true. Whether you have an illegal some family member that's not legally allowed to be here, they're cheating. They're not legally allowed to be here. You might love them, I love them, cool, but they're still cheating. They're breaking the rules. And the person who's hired them is cheating. You can justify it for a reason that you think, and you want to say, oh, I justify it, and here's why. And that's fine. But they're, they're still cheating. Okay? Neither here nor there. I don't care. The other part of the pie is going back to the beginning, the incentive structure. Okay? So the incentive structure portion is kind of messed up because, in my opinion, by the way, had Amazon, this is just my opinion, had Amazon been, I hate to call it Amazon, so let me be cautious with my words. This is dark. It's really dark. I gotta be cautious with any company that I kind of pick on when it comes to this, because there are a lot of companies out here that appear to be extremely amazing winners, but they were either allowed to not have to play by the rules of our system, or they were subsidized on the way up. They were like synthetically subsidized for their inefficiencies. Their inefficiencies were never really actually realized because they were subsidized on the way up. And that's the sad part. And some of them are these trophy companies like Amazon. That's fine, but I don't know. Is America better for Amazon right now? Maybe Amazon Web Services, yeah, but is all the mom and pop shops missing from America? All these mom and pop shops, all these companies being just disappeared? Is that a and by the way, countless amounts of jobs and just horrible labor conditions. Is that is the damage done from Amazon worth the fact that you can get a dog toy delivered to your front doorstep tomorrow? Is the trade-off worth it? I don't think so. I haven't ordered something from Amazon, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. I refuse to. But a lot of people disagree. They don't care. They don't see the effects of it. But there's also a pathway. Amazon has a pathway, and they've been allowed to grow in a way where they haven't had to pay for they haven't had to be punished for their inefficiencies. And that's crazy, because when a company can operate with a bunch of inefficiencies and they don't have to deal with the punishment, because if you are a plumber and you're ultra inefficient, the market's going to punish you. You're going to start losing money, you're going to start losing customers, the market will punish you. But if you're Amazon and you have a bunch of inefficiencies, you can operate for 20 years like that, and the market you never realize the punishment of your inefficiencies. That's a whole different video, because it gets really dark. It gets really dark, and I don't want to speak on it too much. This is just my opinion. These are not, you know, Just my opinion. And there's a bunch of these companies. And I'm talking about, this is one part of the pie to the upside. Okay? There's also to the downside. So the punishment, the inefficiencies, to the upside, the carrot, and the whip. Okay? A lot of companies, there are, in my opinion, like 10 companies that are worth, in my opinion, that are completely worth it to bail out. If they start failing, I would agree. Even if I was in Congress, I would say bail them out. Give them unlimited money. Just don't let them fail. They're too big to fail. They mean too much to the country. Give them what they need. And I would do that. And by the way, Amazon happens to be one of them. I think Amazon is at the status to where I think if something were to go wrong, I was the government, I would say, give them what they want. They're too big to fail. And you know who else is? You know who else I think is, because Amazon employs a couple 100,000 people, and Walmart's, in my opinion, too big. And I would say if something started happening with Walmart, I'd say bail them out. And by the way, Boeing, if something bad happened to Boeing, I would say bail them out. They're an American company that I think they have the largest manufacturing facility on Earth, and they employ countless amount of Americans, and they're number one exporter. They're manufacturing powerhouse. They're amazing. They're so good for the country. I would say give them what they want. Give them what they want. And same thing for Ford, by the way. I know Ford, not a good product. I don't like it. They put a horrible. But you know what they could do during wartime? They could ramp up those factories instantly during wartime. If you say enough with the pickups, we need missiles, they'd have that done immediately. So yeah, if Ford starts failing, bail them out. Chevy starts failing, bail them out. Boeing starts failing, bail them out. Amazon, bail them out. Google, bail them out. Apple, bail them out. There is such thing, and this is the incentive structure that I think is kind of acceptable at this level to discuss, because this is a subsidy in a way. If Ford were to start failing, you kind of subsidize you pad them to the downside. There's a little padding, or Boeing, or there's a lot of companies. Not unlimited though. Not unlimited. If if you know if Pulte or Lennar, this is a good one. If Lennar started going under and needed a government bailout, they are not too big to fail. They're just not. That's my opinion. They're not. That's a great example. It's a great example. If Pulte started failing, needed a bailout, I would not say, in my opinion, and I'm just a regular bro, I would say, no, they're not big enough. Let them realize their lack of productivity and their inefficiencies and their failures. Let them realize that, sell off their assets, declare bankruptcy, and another player will build a better product for a better price, and people aren't going to be affected by mold or whatever else it is. Let the market figure it out. And you know what? Toll Brothers would probably say, hey, we're going to break up the company into two. We're going to focus on the Southeast. Something would happen. The market would figure it out. Okay? But the problem is three parts of the pie, right? That I was talking about earlier. The third part of the pie was supply and demand dynamics and price equilibrium. Excuse me, price discovery equilibrium, as it specifically relates to labor. In the middle was the simplest, most short, direct, codified into law membership criteria. So you got supply and demand, specifically price discovery, and that whole equilibrium as it relates specifically to labor and the workers' inability to withhold labor for higher wages, right? That's 90% of the problem. The other 10% of the problem is in the other two categories. 8% of which is membership criteria. So you have 90%. You can distill it all the way down to the workers' inability to withhold their labor for higher wages. The other 8% is membership criteria, and it's not being enforced, and you have probably 20 to 30 million. I would gander 1 out of 8 people working is not legally allowed to work. Maybe 1 in 7. It's that bad. It's really bad. It could be worse. I don't know. To my, like crapshoot knowledge, just gut feeling, it's probably somewhere between 1 out of 8 and 1 out of 10, but probably less than 10. It's probably in single digits, 9.9, 9 somewhere between 1 in 8 and 1 in 9.9 people is not legally allowed to work. And the membership criteria is not enforced. So you have 90% of the pie is the supply and demand dynamics and price discovery. Remember this part, price discovery of labor. Forget about goods and services. Price discovery of labor. You cannot go to your boss and say, I want more money. And the reason why you can't do that is because the middle part of the pie, the membership criteria, isn't enforced. That is the sole reason, not because you're not good enough or you don't deserve more, yada, yada, yada. And this is where the deception takes place. This is where the deceiving is. Here's what's so demonic about this. Here's why people are marching on Wall Street, and they don't know why. They just march there, and they're like, something's wrong, and I feel it deep inside, but here's where they can't define it. The sole reason why they cannot get more money for their and earn a better living is because membership criteria. It's not enforced. Whether you like it or not, you might say, I'm okay not making money. My family's not legally allowed to be here, so I'm okay being poor, and that's fine. No judgment. And you might say, I'm super far left, and I believe in, everybody. I'm okay being poor because I would rather have a person eating food, and being poor forever is okay to me because they don't have to be in, Ecuador or Peru or whatever. You can say that. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. But you have 90% of the problem, inability to withhold your labor for higher wages. 8% of the problem is membership criteria. The other 2% is that of the problem is that last bucket. And it's not that the incentive structure, 1% is that the incentive structure to the upside is fairly broken, meaning companies are allowed to grow at a rate that is synthetic. They're allowed to grow at a synthetically unusual rate of growth where they otherwise would not be allowed. They wouldn't be able to do it on their own without the synthetic fake help. And there's a lot of intricacies to that fake help. It could be a subsidy. It could be a write-off. It could be changing the code, changing the laws. It's a whole bunch of things. It's a complicated economy we're in now. But companies are allowed to grow at a rate at which, if they weren't getting fake synthetic help to the upside, they wouldn't be able to grow at this rate. It would take them a whole lot longer. And your mom and pop shops wouldn't have been all wiped out. Maybe a couple of them, for sure. But not all of them wiped out in 15 years. The entire country's mom and pop just all gone in 15 years. That wouldn't happen. So they wouldn't be able to grow at a rate. Companies would be like, oh, well, we're not as good as we think we are. And then they get humbled. Or our inefficiencies really hurt us this quarter. And then they're like, it would be more of a regular rate of growth, like any other imperfect company. But instead, there's a bunch of synthetic. The cheating is that there's a bunch of injected the synthetic demand, or not demand, synthetic help that these companies get to the upside, and then they just go crazy to the upside, and then you see every fucking mom and pop shop just get wiped. And you're like, wow, that happened fast. 15 years, holy moly. And that's another thing. And then you also have the synthetic stuff to the downside. So you have a company like, I don't know, I'm just cherry picking. These companies, none of them, what I'm talking about is facts. None of this is even financial advice. This is just my opinion. I'm just, and by the way, Amazon, Target, Lennar, these are all just hypothetical. I don't know the financials of these companies. These are all just like off the cuff, okay? Like, I have no idea how if these companies are doing good or bad. These just like, obviously none of this is scripted. I'm cherry picking regular names that people who maybe shop at or understand about, you know? The other part, the first part of the pie, the synthetic growth to the upside, and then also the synthetic help to the downside. So companies aren't allowed to fail. There are too big to fail companies, and I agree with that. If Google starts failing, you make sure you give them what they need. Give them what they need you give them what they need. Make sure that nothing happens. They're a token trophy company. Boeing starts going into failure or whatever. Give them anything they need. Amazon, Walmart, maybe not Walmart, but I don't know. Amazon's got AWS and everything. Give them what they need. They're trophy now. It's sad. I'm conflicted. But definitely Boeing, Ford, Caterpillar, stuff like that. Any companies like that, especially if they have limited competition, like Caterpillar and John Deere and stuff, there's limited competition for them, so they should get a lot of help if they need it. It's not like you could, we'll talk about the different time, but there's synthetic help to the downside, and for a lot of companies, it's totally unnecessary. Like, let's just say this for a second. A company like Lennar is not structurally important, or it's not structurally, it's not a necessity. It's not, is it here? It's not systemically important. Let me repeat this. Boeing, Google, Apple, Amazon, Ford, these companies are what I would call systemically important. These are needed. Boeing, Amazon, Apple, whoever runs anything cloud related. Palantir, I think, is up there. I think Palantir is one of the best, if not, they're up there. They're systemically important. These companies are systemically important, especially Google and Ford. Like these, and even Chase, systemically important. But Lennar is not. Lennar's not. They mean a lot. They're a big company and stuff. They're awesome, but they're not systemically important. The country is not going to go into ultra, like, people will still survive. Like, Lennar is not too big to fail. Okay, they're just not. They're not. But when Lennar has 5 or 6 or 7 really bad quarters, the problem is, and I'm not saying they do, I'm saying companies like Lennar, they have a 3, 4, 5 bad quarters, and they'll lobby the government and they'll get a bailout. They don't call it a bailout, but they'll get some kind of bailout. And this happens all the freaking time. And it's not just with really, really big, non-systemically important companies. This was kind of like medium-sized companies too. Like as long as you lobby good enough, good to go. So each part of the pie, somebody's cheating or screwing up or not playing by the rules in each part of the pie. The membership criteria, which is the most structurally important part of the pie, is to uphold that. It's easiest, most simplest, straightforward, but hardest to enforce. There's massive cheating in that part of the pie. Then the second part of the pie, or the third part of the pie, was the price discovery, specifically related to labor and why you can't withhold your labor for higher wages. Because this is a supply and demand thing, right? And remember, supply and demand also, people don't normally think about it because they think supply and demand, they instantly think of products and services. They don't think about labor. What is the demand? What is the supply of labor? What's the demand of labor? It's also a labor thing. Supply and demand is not, you have to take this out of your mind. It's not just goods and services. It's labor too. It's human. Look at the human. If you can look at the human as an item, just economically speaking, it might help you remember that it's not just supply and demand. It's not just two things. Price discovery affects this water as much as it does how much Domino's pays their delivery guy. Okay? And it's broken too, because actually, I think the most palatable, to be honest with you, the most palatable, economically speaking, okay? This is my opinion. The most palatable part of the cheating, if cheating's happening, and if cheating and breaking the rules or not adhering to the rules is happening, and you look at three parts of the pie, three sectors of what I'm discussion, right? The most palatable cheating is coming from the bailouts and the subsidies and the subsidies to the upside and the synthetic incentives structure, and also the bailouts to the downside. I think that's the most economically palatable thing because it does the least amount of damage, contrary to what everybody complains about. It's the least amount of damage done in that area. I'm not applauding it, but I'm saying there's a whole lot less damage done when there's government bailouts and stuff. Not as much damage as you think. Not compared to the other two sides of the pie. I would gander hardly, not even close to it at all. Massive, widespread bailouts for medium to large size companies that are not systemically important does almost marginal amount of tiny little bit of damage compared to the amount of damage that it does when they don't uphold the membership criteria portion of this. When they allow 1 out of 7 people to illegal immigrant to work. If you go to dinner with 7 people for 20 years in a row, and one person for 20 years never pays, that really screws things up. That's kind of just a weird example, but that has a much greater effect on, if the waiter or waitress picks up the bill every once in a while and says, this one's on me, or hey, the chef's paying tonight. It's for over a 20-year period. Even if you have widespread bailouts, like even if you give Amazon, even if you change the law and you allow Walmart to get $100 billion worth of incentives that they otherwise wouldn't get, and that they would fail without having, that has a very small effect in comparison to the membership criteria portion. The membership, nothing works, by the way. Nothing. Everything else could be perfect. Price discovery, labor, all that. Wouldn't matter. If membership criteria portion of capitalism isn't fixed, it doesn't matter if either of the other two sides are perfected, this system will fail. 100%, it will fail. It might take a long time, but we're looking at 100% guaranteed failure. Okay? It's not a personal thing. I feel bad for people who have illegal immigrants in their family. I would say to myself, I'm okay being poor as my family. So it's nuanced. Your girlfriend or wife, her family might be illegal immigrants. And you can say, you know what, like, I'm okay not retiring. I love these people. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't have both. You can't have the expectation of being able to go to your boss and getting higher wages if you're okay with membership criteria portion of this agreement, this social contract, the membership criteria portion just being completely broken for decades. You don't get both. It doesn't exist. It's like you know, it's like wanting something for free and expecting it to be ultra high quality. You don't get that. Nobody gets that. Ever. Doesn't exist. It's a fairy tale. But nothing gets fixed. This is just the 1 hour version of capitalism. The incentive structure, we'll go over it one more time. The incentive based, the ability to know in your brain that you can get rich is what motivates the person to improve their surroundings. That's what, or a product or a service. It delivered to the market something good and better or more competitive, faster, whatever, because they know they're going to get paid. That's a great motivator, and that's what keeps the system moving forward. And the same thing for fail. It also keeps the system in competition with each other. Lexus must compete for Mercedes must compete with BMW, because if they screw over their customers, BMW will say, hey, come this way. Whatever. Incentive, membership criteria, and a price discovery. And you have to look at like a flow chart inside your brain. Okay? So inside your brain, you have to have these 3 buckets in your brain. Membership criteria, uh, um, uh, price discovery, and then incentive. The incentive-based system this is a carrot-based system. It's not a whip-based system. The guy who creates the cure for HIV doesn't do it, because he wants to feel good. He does it because he knows he'll be a billionaire. Okay? And it's just easy. Nobody talks about this anymore. Okay, so you have to put in your brain the three parts of the pie, and then you have to kind of you have to look at it like a flow chart in your brain, and what you have to do is you have to ask yourself, is this true? Why is this happening? If this, then what? So it's like a flow chart. It's like a who, what, when, where, why, how for each topic, not each topic, each subgroup. Like on this end, when you have the flow chart on the third part of the pie, you have price discovery, but inside that price discovery bucket, inside that you have that in your brain, and inside that price discovery bucket, you have a flow chart where you have 3 things. You say, supply and demand or supply and demand and price discovery for what you'd say, goods, services, and labor. Okay, and then for each of those things, goods, services, and labor are each going to have their own splinters of, like labor, for example. You say, okay, what if so? If the How does this person get paid more? Is it possible? Who, what, when, where, why, how? Who gets paid? The member. What, when, where, why, how? And then each for those questions, you splinter those off. You say how, what? How do they get paid more? Is it possible? Is this true? and it's like a splinter. It's kind of like a web, and you can if you need to close your eyes or something, you can kind of structure this in a flow chart where it goes out and it gets um, more and more complicated, and kind of like on this side, right? On this side, you can kind of say, okay, the incentive base is the synthetic to the upside, or that's what splinters like this way. You can say, is there synthetic growth? Is somebody injecting synthetic growth to make this go up synthetically, where maybe this company would otherwise they would try to innovate, but they would get punished for their innovation wasn't good enough. So they would get punished for it. So maybe they wouldn't grow at such a parabolic rate. Maybe it would be more steady. And you say to the downside too. You say, okay, what does it mean to be big? What does it mean to be too big to fail? And what are those? Who, what, when, where, why, how? And you can kind of look at this like a flow chart, and you say, okay, what is the difference? What is the threshold between systemically important or structurally important? Too big to fail, or really, really big, but allowed to fail? What is the difference? Who, what, when, where, why, how? And is this true? If so, you have to ask yourself that if you need to write it down, that's cool. You can write it down. But it should be fairly easy because it's like a flow chart. I don't know, maybe I just think weird, but it's more of it is a flow chart thing. And you can take everything splinters off of these three buckets. That's capitalism. You have three buckets. The membership criteria, the incentive structure, and the supply and demand dynamics, but specifically is supply and demand is kind of a derivative. Everybody understands supply and demand, but supply and demand in itself, the concept of supply and demand is a derivative. It's really price discovery. If you think about it, supply and demand is a derivative of price discovery. Or I guess maybe not. They interact with each other in a very special way. Sometimes there are situations in my head that I know I can think of immediately where it's the opposite. Where price discovery is a derivative of supply and demand, but they work in unison with each other. There's an equilibrium. It's an equilibrium. Supply and demand dynamics works in unison. I guess it's like a lungs. It's like lungs. They're breathing, so it's always changing too, because you can insert, because competition, you can insert innovation and invention and new efficient ways of doing things, or the industrialization of something, you know. But the system is dude, the system is breaking. But maybe I just think weird because each of these things, you can look at it like a bucket. Maybe I'll write this down because it spreads out. It spreads out big, and you can see the effects on the fringes, and then you can see the effects on the edges, and you can see the effects in the middle, and then just on the periphery you can also see the effects. In the 90s, when the bigot or the racist says, well, it's just farm workers. In the 90s, you could see, and I don't know, I'm able to see it in my head too. It's very easy to see this. But in the 90s, it wasn't the periphery. Things were still intact. It wasn't even the middle, or it wasn't even the outside or the edges. It was at the very, very fringes that things were starting to crack. When the bigot says from 1990 thinks that we're in 1996, it says, oh, well, illegal membership criteria is not a problem because who's going to go to the fields and pick all the fruit? It's like, dude, wow, that's so bigoted. That's so racist. But in the 1996, it would economically, it would be understandable somebody would say that. Even though it was still racist, it would be economically understandable that they would say that, because and nobody would, it would kind of be mostly true statement. it would be economically true, or economically understandable, but it would also be a mostly true statement because everybody except on the very, very outer edges and the very fringes of this web, of this flowchart, this web, everybody would be insulated except for the very, very, very fringes of this. So only the cracks in the system, because the membership criteria was being broken for the farm workers, and mostly only for the farm workers, nobody else really. It's only the fringes that were affected. So everybody else was insulated from the problem. But it's not 1996 anymore. Less than 1 in 5 American high schoolers has a job. It's not 96 anymore. It's not even 2008 anymore. This is 2026 now. This is different now. This is good. We're in for some big boy problems coming up. They have to, either this system fixes very soon, or it's the Overton window of close. That flow chart, it's not going to matter. It's just going to be, okay, relocate your family. That is because the worst place anybody could be is when because the scariest thing ever that is ultra scary is a crowd that doesn't know, why all this suffering is happening. The crowd doesn't understand, why are we all suffering? That's so scary. And that's what's coming, I think, because capitalism is breaking right now. But the least problematic portion of this flowchart, this like web, you can look at it, like I said earlier, in your brain. Who, what, when, where, why, how is an easy way to kind of think about it. And then look at it like a flowchart and say, write down, circle these three, like we used to do when we were in high school or middle school. Make a circle and put membership criteria, a circle, and then put the supply and demand, and then put a slash, and then put underneath that, put price discovery, and then put an asterisk in there and underline labor, price of labor, and then under that underline withholding labor for higher wages, inability to withhold labor for higher wages. And that's how you kind of go through this flow chart as it in your brain. I'm not writing any of this down. I don't write that. This is easy to see for me to think about this because I see it every day. I'm able to think this is happening for sure, 100%. But then also in the middle, if it helps you to write this down, write the membership criteria and say who, what, when, where, why, how. Who belongs? Why do they belong? Since or for how long have they belonged? Who doesn't belong? Why are they here? Why don't they not? Why are they here? Why don't they belong? Who's breaking the system? Who's cheating? And then you could also say, well, what would it look like if all cheating members, were to suddenly become actual legal members of the system? You can really break this down any way you want. And you could also say, hey, listen, you know what? Instantly make them all members, but get rid of Medicare or Medicaid. That's also, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think it's the worst thing to do, but that's also a solution in a literal sense. It's an economic thing that you could say that you could legally be done, like not legally, but like on paper, it's possible. So you have to kind of open your mind. You have to expand your brain in order to kind of look at this. I don't think that should, a lot of people, they'll talk about, oh, well, America's a nation of immigrants back in, the Roosevelt era, or, pre-Roosevelt in 1901 and in 1919 and 1923, this was a nation of immigrants. Yeah, that's true. You're 100% correct. But there was no membership criteria. That is 100% correct. But the membership criteria wasn't important. Yeah, I guess that you could say here, I came to America and I am a citizen now and everything. It wasn't really important though. Membership, people died back then when you were like 45 years old, 50 years old. So you didn't really depend, it wasn't a welfare state. Okay, social services, the concept of social services didn't exist. That's why they built 3 flats and 2 flats. That's why you lived next to the railroad. Okay, so back then it wasn't a welfare state. And if you're not a welfare state, membership criteria is not super important. Yeah, it matters, but it's not critical to the structure of your system. Okay. And then the last but least problematic portion of this pie is the synthetic injections to the upside and the synthetic padding to the downside. That's my 1 hour and 15-minute. I can go into this later and go on because this touches everything. And I just kind of wanted to put it out there because I see a lot of people who are on YouTube and they're pontificating from there are a bunch of people on YouTube that I see that are pontificating to people like me and you, and they have their financial channels and they either know the problem and they either know these things that I'm explaining to you now today. They either know about them and they won't talk about them because it benefits them to not talk about it. Or they know about the problems that I'm talking about today and they will intentionally talk about something else to distract you, which is both of those are really nefarious and bad. And I've seen this because I see fucking people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars distracting you, never talking about membership criteria. They're never talking about withholding your labor for higher wages. They just say capitalism best, capitalism best, capitalism best. And the more the people do this, the more the people say capitalism best, capitalism best, capitalism best, and they don't explain the actual why people are hurting so bad and why people are so poor and why there's no such thing as a livable wage anymore. The more people pretend this isn't a big thing, is going to give greater and greater rise to socialism, which is something I do not want. I do not want that. But it's going to fuel the fire, and we're seeing it right now. And I do not. I pray to Jesus Christ that does not happen, because that is really bad. And I just want to explain to people what's not being discussed, what's not being talked about, and I don't know. I see this not even in like a unique way. I see this for what it is. I see this for how this is very easy to see. And you know what it is? It's a flowchart thing. It's a mental exercise thing because you don't have to be intelligent, you just have to be committed to finding out what the problem is. Yeah, put a little bit of as long as you don't have a 6-second or 26-second attention span, you can get to the edge of this. And ideally, if you have 6 hours or 8 hours, you can find out the answer to all of these problems, and you can find out the why to every single question that you have like this when it comes to this topic. But most people don't have the endurance or dedication or the will, or I don't know. I don't know why that is. I can't judge them. I don't know why. But I'm also somebody, I don't have any social media. I don't do any of that shit because, like, I don't know. I just don't want to be mushed up and shit. But anyways, that's just my explanation, and I figured I would give my explanation to you guys. And here's the other thing too. I'm not special. Like I was literally walking around my neighborhood before I came in. I'm like, dude, because I was listening to something on YouTube. I'm like, dude, this is a fucking lie, bro. I'm like, what the fuck, bro? Like, this is a fucking lie, straight up fucking lie from an ultra rich, fucking mega zillionaire. Hey, buddy, come on, come on, come here, come on. I was listening to this ultra rich 100 fucking centrillionaire fucking he is worth a couple hundred million. I'm like, dude, this guy's fucking lying, bro. I'm worth nothing. I'm worth fucking nothing. So I'm like, I gotta get on here and just come on. I'm like, dude, if this guy's fucking lying, he's either how's this guy worth a couple hundred mil? And he's lying to me like this. Come on. Look at my buddy. Come on up here. Come on. Come on, Max. Up. Yeah. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. He's a good boy. You love me? You love me? He's a good boy. But I saw this guy, this Pontifex. I guess you could call him. I'm not gonna call him out by name. But I'm like, dude, this guy's freaking lying, bro. So I'm outside walking, doing my laps and stuff. And I'm like, yo, like I gotta correct the record because this is freaking bull frick. So this is what the real nature of our. We will keep suffering until people stand up and say, hey, you know, it can't just be capitalism for the little guy. It can't just be capitalism for the little guy, and then, you know, mega help for the chosen. I mean, it could, but the system's gonna fail. Maybe I say it like this: it can't just be capitalism for the little guy, like me and you, or me and Joe Plumber. It can't just be capitalism for us. Hey, buddy. And then mega help, as long as you're the chosen, like chosen company, chosen person, chosen, you know. And that's what we're in right now. That's the system we're in. So I mean, it could, but and I'm in my 30s. But if we keep trending this way, then you're gonna have to make a contingency. I'm telling you, you will have to make a contingency plan eventually. So not now, but like 10, 15, 20 years, you're gonna have to make some kind of plan to leave the country because it will get bad. Historically speaking, that would suggest that things would get really bad because there's historical precedent. What's that noise, pal? You like my Popeye? Yeah. My little sidekick right here. He's the one in the photos. Hey, buddy. You being a good boy? But that's just my explanation. I can put it in a whiteboard if you want. Now, if you could, please. I'm new to this, and I'm just like starting out and stuff. So I really have no game plan when I'm coming at and doing this stuff. But can you please uh click on my like button or share it with somebody and if you did like it or if you watched a couple minutes of this, please. Um, and if you want to subscribe, I can explain the more stuff to you. I have a lot of opinions and views on things, and my ultimate goal is to get rich. I'm not rich. That's my ultimate goal, is to get rich. You can do it too. You can get rich. We can get rich. We can tap our way out of this. The smart people and the brilliant people can find a way out. And you and I, if you're watching this right now, you have the will to understand. You have the desire and the desire to understand what the frick is going wrong. Pray to God. Pray to your Lord. Pray to our Lord, and you will find a way. I promise you. Pray to God. You'll find a way. Just keep learning. You can do it, and so can I. I'm not some pontifex. My shirts have holes in them. Like I'm poor. Maybe not as poor as a lot of people, but I'm not, dude. I'm hurting bad. So, but I have hope, and I have faith in Jesus, and we can make it out. And I know I'm not like toot my own horn, but I'm smart as fuck, dude. And I give glory to God for my intelligence because I am smart, and I get my intelligence from God, and I'm smart as fuck. Okay, I'm freaking smart as fuck, dude. But I get my intelligence from Jesus, so I take no credit from it. But smart always wins, baby. Let's get that paper. Come on. Thank you for watching this. May Jesus bless you.